this project to prepare a national adaptation plan approved by GCF. Now, this project will cost us $1.1 million as opposed to what the national adaptation plan will likely cost, which is all the seawalls, all the investment we need in water, all of the protection for agriculture. So this is a particularly important project as we assess our risk. We have also completed what is called Learning by Doing preparation of the 4th National Communications and the 2nd Biennial Report. The key outcomes of the enabling activities to prepare Jamaica's 4th National Communication and 2nd Biennial Update are the following. Fulfill the convention of the UNFCCC with respect to national communications. Further strengthen the technical and institutional capacity. Enhance the capacity and efficiency for continuous preparation of national communications and biannual reports. Colleagues, these matters are highly technical, but they are our responsibility under the Paris Agreement, which we signed and we all congratulated when we did so. We've also, through the Ministry of Economic Growth and the Ministry of Local Government, we've significantly advanced on Jamaica's implementation of what is called the local mechanism. Geared towards local government entities, local facilities, strengthening of capacity for adaptation planning and assessing climate finance. The Government of Jamaica partnered with the UNCDF, the custodians of the local program, to prepare and submit a proposal to the GCF to fund preliminary activities for municipal corporations. Mr. President, in essence, this will help municipal corporations to upgrade municipal water systems and to manage their infrastructure better. Mr. President, important to note also, Jamaica is indeed an ambassador of the UNCDF local program. Mr. President, major achievements of the CCD and indeed the country this year have included a significant launch, one that was dubbed facilitating a gender-responsive approach to climate change adaptation and mitigation in Jamaica. And that was particularly important because globally, especially single mothers bear a greater impact of climatic disasters than men. Mr. President, we have also spent a significant amount of time on public education because it is not lost on me that much of the country does not yet quite understand climate change and the impacts that we face. A lot of this would have been for pre-COP activities. We also would have completed and prepared our first adaptation communication. As a party to the Paris Agreement, Jamaica has a flexibility in reporting on its adaptation progress, priorities and needs by way of an ADCOM. Mr. President, Jamaica has not sat idly by since COP26. Since that time, the country has advanced a holistic national disaster risk financing strategy. We have launched a catastrophe bond to provide significant financial protection against named storms up to the end of 2023. Jamaica, along with partners, launched what is called JSRAT, the Jamaica Systemic Risk Assessment Tool, which to increase climate change considerations in investment. Now, this one isn't in the document email, and perhaps the screen doesn't do it justice, so I will email colleagues later. But what you're looking at for this tool, I know is particularly interesting to people like Senator Webby and Senator Bunting, who deal with major capital investments. Senator Hill. Senator Crawford is getting there, and we're working on it, but he's getting there. But in all seriousness, this tool and the phases outlined there evaluate the risk to investments, evaluate the risk to our infrastructure. So in essence, it tells you what the country needs to do with its consolidated fund to get the best return, to build in the most resilience. It was done in collaboration with the entire energy sector and with the private sector, certainly through players at the PSOJ and JCC, Sir Dan. So we know where persons have put their infrastructure. We've done the heavy GIS work, and we know what's at risk. So the investments in our capital fund will reflect the fact, Mr. President, that we are indeed accepting that we're on the front lines of climate change, Mr. President. So this is a major, and to note, Mr. President, this project was designed by the University of Oxford, was implemented by the CCRI and funded by the GCF. And for that, we're very thankful for the support we would have received in this regard. We're also preparing a national adaptation plan accompanied by a financial strategy and investment plan. We are well underway with our national tree planting initiative to plant 3 million trees. We have launched an EV policy and reduced taxes to make the transition more competitive. We have also reduced taxes for solar panels, and we are nearing the completion of Jamaica's emissions policy and climate change policies, Mr. President. Mr. President, within the context of our national response, allow me to highlight a few of our major projects. One will be the Water and Clean Energy Supply and Storage Program. The target this year is to complete the development of a project structure and appoint a transaction partner for an integrated water and energy project which will incorporate desalination, powered by solar energy with a pumped hydro storage component. We are targeting significant support from the GCF and other multilateral partners for this project. The second in this national response, Mr. President, is the Portmore Resilience Park. The development of the park will see the transformation of 18 acres of arid lands with urban centre into a public green recreation, sporting, wellness and entertainment space for the Portmore community and visitors to the area. Though previously declared, we will be putting the investment in the coming 12 months into this project. Mr. President, Jamaica's international position and positioning should be noted by the Senate. Jamaica has always supported the multilateral system as it gives us a seat at the table. We have also been active in engaging multilateral partnerships, including the UNCDF local program. I mean, I serve as ministerial ambassador in that space, the High Ambition Coalition and the NDC partnership, just to name a few within the climate change realm. In our role as NDC partnership co-chair with the UK, we oversaw the launch of the NDC Partnership's finance strategy to mobilize international finance for NDC action this year. And for those who don't know, that's a nationally determined contributions. Now, this partnership, to understand what it means for Jamaica to have chaired it, has 200 members, including 115 countries, developed and developing, and more than 80 institutions to create and deliver ambitious climate action that helps achieve the Paris Agreement and the Sustainable Development Goals. It is important that I remind this Senate and indeed the country that it was the Most Honourable Andrew Holness who was asked by the Secretary General of the UN in 2018 to join President Macron of France and the Emir of Qatar to take the global lead, Mr. President, in raising $100 billion for climate finance. Jamaica has stood tall on the global stage and supported by a well-regarded technical team while maintaining morally strong negotiating positions. Mr. President, as I close this section on climate change, I share with colleagues a call to action from Jamaica's national statement at COP27. The global financial architecture and mechanisms must change. Sadly, there are still issues of access that must be rectified and made simpler. Small island states have been voicing concerns as well about the growing dissonance in establishing a loss and damage funding arrangement. We unreservedly join with other developing countries in calling for a loss and damage fund that help countries address the inevitable impacts. I thought it important for colleagues to understand the positions that Jamaica would have taken. One of the most important tools in addressing the triple planetary crisis, Mr. President, as we move on, is indeed forests. And I want to share with you the state of Jamaica's forests. Jamaica is quite rightly titled and called the land of wood and water. So, President, the Forestry Department of MEGJC is the lead agency responsible for the island's forest resources. We manage approximately 117,000 hectares of forests in Jamaica. It is the government's lead agency in protection and conservation of the forest resources. But, Mr. President, what is the state of our forests? Jamaica's land cover is approximately 46% forests, with 27% of those being under government protection. As stated above, Jamaica is a member of the High Ambition Coalition. Now, what this means is that we are targeting 30% of both our landmass and marine areas being protected under law by 2030. We are well underway to achieve that target on landmass by 2025, colleagues. Mr. President, to accomplish this, government and private landowners have been engaged. Growth versus declines in the forest cover. There is a lot out there, and sometimes people speak, sometimes they have the information, sometimes they don't. In 2013, the land use cover assessments concluded that Jamaica had 40% cover, and the work done under the RED Plus Readiness Program has clearly suggested a significant increase in part to the reversion of some agricultural lands. The level of increase will be properly quantified in the work to be completed in the coming financial year on a revised LOLCA, and will form the basis of anchoring even more of Jamaica's forest cover under protected area status. So what is in front of you and on the table ahead, what it shows is Jamaica actually having increasing secondary forest cover as farmlands are recovered. You have slight loss of dense forests, some of which has been to wildfires during bad drought period, because you really don't have access to your dense forests otherwise. And you do see, certainly, which is something we need to discuss, Senator Binns, as we have our consultations, you do see reductions in mangroves and indeed your dry forests, but your dry forests tend to be the best areas for housing. So it's something we have to contemplate in terms of how we're going to manage our resources and land use going forward. The next slide, which is terrible on this screen, but I'm encouraging colleagues to look at the email in their phone, shows the changes in forest cover and therefore the many opportunities for Red Plus to manage our forest cover better. Mr. President, even for those who don't see ourselves as tree huggers, we should understand that the forests provide enormous economic benefits. Mr. President, in addition to the forest contribution to the microclimate and to all of the environmental indicators, there is an economic contribution. This is why the Forestry Department will host its National Forestry Conference next week, and we invite all senators to attend should they have the time. Sustainable economic contribution of the GDP of Jamaica is indeed possible from our forests. Jobs, both in planting, maintaining, being tour guides, timber, non-timber products, are possible through agroforestry. Forest recreation, forest and food security, forestry value chains create opportunities for our people, Mr. President. Mr. President, within this fiscal year, the Forestry Department has completed its Forestry Management Plan number 4. This has now been approved and will now allow the Forestry Department to restart timber harvesting and increase their revenue. At the same time, it allows the conversion of some existing pine forests, which are regenerative, to higher value, more natural forests in some instances, with species like mahogany, cedar, blue maho, teak, and Spanish elm being chief among them. Mr. President, it must be noted that the push for economic contribution is built on the principles of sustainability. There will be no compromising of the environmental standards. All harvesting will be based on a predetermined annual allowable cut, which is based on what is called the precautionary principle, and which has replanting of harvested areas as a key tenet. While it is known, Mr. President, that old forests store more carbon than younger forests, they sequester it more slowly. The harvesting of timber for long-term uses means that carbon stored remains locked, but at the same time provides opportunities, Mr. President, for newer plants to absorb more carbon faster. That's something that's not widely understood. So using the precautionary principle, you use the areas that have that regenerative effect, that also have the effect and give you the opportunity to capture more carbon faster. Mr. President, we all know in this room, and we all know, I'd imagine, watching at home, Jamaica's forests are amongst the most beautiful in the world and are rich with biodiversity. This means that ecotourism is significant in its potential for economic activity, bolstered by having healthy forests. As such, it is being mentioned in all of Jamaica's new forest management plans. Mr. President, the work of the Forestry Department is critical to Jamaica's environmental health. But like all agencies, strong oversight is required and transparency critical to credibility. One of the first instructions I received from the Prime Minister when I was reassigned to MEGJEC was to bring the Forestry Department in compliance with all required filings and reports, with the exception of submission and tabling of annual reports. It is. While it is true that the last report was tabled in 2012, the agency has completed reports for all periods and audited financials up to now 2018, which will be tabled soon. We expect to complete the outstanding reports by the end of the financial year and bring the agency into compliance by March 2023. Mr. President, I'm happy to share with colleagues and indeed the country a few of the major achievements of the Forestry Department for this year. One that I'm particularly proud of was the ground truthing, the completion of the ground truthing exercise for the cockpit country. After 50 years of malaise and dawdling, we protected in excess of 78,000 hectares of the cockpit country, making it the largest protected area in the Caribbean. Mr. President, I'd also like to bring your attention to the National Tree Planting Initiative. Colleagues, and I'll run through because I'm not trying to cut too much into my friend and brother's time, but we have to date planted 2,229,527 trees since the launch of that initiative. And we have an over 90% survivability rate. And I would encourage colleagues as they plant the trees that we will give you on exit, that you download the app and you log the location so that we're able to track the progress of that tree and the tree cover as we communicate with you over time. We have also launched the National School Tree Planting Competition. So far, more than 60 schools have registered, and students are working hard to produce and plant their own trees in this effort before the February 28th deadline. I have to commend the various organizations which have come on board. All of the NGOs, all of the service clubs who have come to the Forestry Department to participate in this initiative. They have pulled some 8,000 food and fruit trees, and we've also distributed some 2,500 coloring books which teach young children about the importance of trees. We have also, Mr. President, and I know it's the Senator Braham, but we've also allocated 310 trees for UDC, for Parliament Circle, to ensure that that area is as green as it should be. Mr. President, we have also completed the Red Plus Phase 1, which is a forest management tool, a very important one that gives you the data that you're seeing, Senator Fraser Biggs. I've actually asked the team to arrange with you at the Forestry Department a full briefing on it, because it will give you the information that will make 30 and 40-year plans based on soil quality, air type, tree planting, tree cover, where it needs to be protected from a scientific basis as opposed to from some of the emotional discussions that we've had over the last couple of years from varying stakeholders. And there's reason for them to be emotional. We need the forest protected, but the information is critical and we'll share it. We've also partnered with a group named Trees That Feed. We've seen significant increases in willingness from homeowners to plant fruit trees in their yards, and we're actively now calibrating the nurseries that we have to produce seedlings of fruit trees to ensure both that we can supply anyone who is interested in building orchards from a commercial standpoint, but certainly homeowners at the household level. But Mr. President, we have major projects to come. We will launch this year our National Mangrove and Swamp Forest Management Plan, and we'll invest some £10.7 million in restoring our swamp forest and mangroves to ensure that that number is different when we sit here in 2 to 3 years. We will also invest significantly in the designation of forest reserves. 8 new areas will come to this Senate in January or February. We're nearing completion of the work, so 8 new forest reserves will be declared early in the new year. We're also ensuring that we are seen as a leader in sustainability. So we're ensuring that our offices indeed employ rainwater harvesting, and we're putting in place that equipment now, President, both at our germination facilities and indeed the head office. We're developing trails to give access to citizens to the forest so that they can appreciate what it is we do indeed have. Now, Mr. President, again, the picture isn't great, but hopefully you can make it out. Planting trees in urban spaces, very important.
Mr. President, the time being now 1:20 p.m., we ask that the time for the sitting of the Senate be extended.
Thank you very much. Members, the question, time being 1:20, the question is the Senate be permitted to sit beyond 1:30 to complete the business of the day. Those in favor? Against? Thank you, Senator Moon.
Recognizing the value and importance of trees in the Jamaican landscape and their critical role in urban spaces, the government of Jamaica has allocated the funds in the recent supplemental estimates to enable the Forestry Department to purchase a tree relocation device. Now, that will help us when roads have to be widened, when housing is being done in particular areas. For some trees, it's highly dependent on root structure, but we will save the ones that we can, and I believe this is an effort that should be commended from the government. We're also, it's well known, we've been building a lot of roads and we'll build a lot more. With 3 roads to come in Kingston and St. Andrew, being Arthur Wink Drive, Lady Musgrave and East Kings House Road, the Prime Minister has directed the Forestry Department to work with the NWA and indeed the NSWMA on streetscaping. Now, we identified, not that they will, but we identified 205 trees along these routes. We have developed a plan that will deploy, plant and track the progress of over 3,000 trees in the area, Mr. President, to ensure that tree cover increases exponentially during and after the construction of these roads, Mr. President. Much of these will be ornamental and timber, but we will also be putting in, Mr. President, for those who traverse this road from time to time along Highway 2000, some 2,000 trees that will also significantly improve the aesthetics along with that space while cooling down the area for those who use it relatively regularly. Now, we are also underway with our land use and land coverage change assessment. Some of this is being informed by the Red Plus project, but it's also being done through the LOLCA project. I'll save that for another day. Something we're particularly proud of is what we're setting up now, which is a Forestry Stewardship Council. This will ensure that we have the right advice, we have the right oversight from a number of stakeholders to ensure we manage this resource carefully. Something, Mr. President, that you will be happy to note. We are nearing completion of the consultation with parish stakeholders to name and designate parish trees in the 60th year of our independence. Now, this would have come from the suggestion from the Poet Laureate, who I believe you had invited to us, Mr. President, Olive Senior. Now, we've had extensive consultations with municipalities, with the custodians, with the agriculturalists, etc., to identify the best options, and very soon we will come to the country with, indeed, these new designations, and we're very happy for that. Mr. President, moving on to our environmental management generally, both by the environmental branch and supported by NEPA. At the UN Ocean Conference in 2019, Jamaica committed to increase its marine protected areas by 2%. Mr. President, I'm happy to report that the country has made significant progress in this area. We have declared the Black River land and seascapes, approximately 207 square kilometers, under the country's principal environmental legislation as protected, and we have completed the work to declare, not a long-standing issue, Mr. President, people have spoken about it for 40 years, the Pedro Keys and surrounding waters, that is 882 square kilometers, as protected under the laws of Jamaica. I expect the Prime Minister to announce the completion of this process and hold up the gazetted document, as he would have done with the cockpit country, in short order. Mr. President, this will allow us to achieve the targets we have set for ourselves. It should be noted that approximately 13% of our marine environment is now declared as protected under the law. This includes special fishery conservation areas, commonly referred to as fish sanctuaries, which has assisted in the replenishment of the country's fish stock. Additionally, the country is in the process of finalizing protected areas legislation under our primary environmental legislation, and will be working on primary protected areas legislation this year. As we have stated, Jamaica is a member of the High Ambition Coalition and are actively working to achieve our 30-30-30 targets. This is the boldness that is required if we are to turn the tide on the health of the ocean, on the health of our forests. Jamaica has achieved 25% of its landmass being protected, certainly with the recent declaration of 78,000 hectares as protected area in the renowned cockpit country. But we are well on the way with our land targets. We do, however, have to do some work and put in some investment in the spatial management and mapping of our ocean space to be able to credibly declare these areas protected. But we will get it done before 2030, Mr. President. One of the points, and I encourage colleagues to read this on better screens when they have a chance, the land ownership impact on land protection. We've done a full survey of where what is. And when you have a chance, take a look so that you understand that we are doing very well by having protected 25% already. And we will get to 30 by 2025. And I hope there will be political consensus when we've done all this analysis work and the Red Plus project is indeed done, Senator Fraser-Binns, in moving that target. My own hope is it will go to 40 or 42%, because I believe with the land use and the land access, it is indeed possible to put in credible protection. And we don't just want to do it on paper, we want to make sure that it is indeed protected in reality. Mr. President, pollution management. Jamaica has not done well in managing its waste, and as such cannot claim victory over pollution. We have, however, acknowledged this, and we are taking concrete steps to address this scourge. The first point this Senate should acknowledge is the delivery and deployment of 50 new garbage trucks to help with the collection of our solid waste. We should also be aware, as brought to our attention by Minister Desmond McKenzie, that a further 50 are being procured, Mr. President. The issue of... There was something named COVID. I'm sure you remember it. The issue of solid waste as a subset of the broader pollution issue has bedeviled us for too long. Mr. President, I'm however proud to be a part of the team led by the PM, which is finally tackling this issue. Allow me to remind colleagues of the elements of the path which he has articulated. One is the closure and decommissioning of 8 municipal dump sites, including Riverton. The establishment of 2 sanitary landfills. 60 megawatts reserved by the GPE for waste energy to make this viable. Legislating and supporting systems to ensure waste separation. We are making strides, Mr. President. Far we have come, but far we must go. As it relates to the issue of plastics, Mr. President, it is well known in this chamber that Jamaica's 3 years ago, implemented a ban on specific types of single-use plastics. In this regard, we banned the import, manufacture, distribution of use of plastic bags of a specific dimension, polystyrene foam products used in food and beverage industry, and plastic drinking straws. Mr. President, this Senate supported this ban, except the current leader of the opposition who abstained. The principal intent of the ban is to reduce non-recyclable, non-biodegradable, carcinogenic waste from entering the waste stream. Mr. President, it is impatient of debate that in recent times there have been those who breach the law in flouting the ban. In fact, and the Senate should record, that we have prosecuted successfully over 60 such businesses who have breached the ban. We will, however, have to redouble our efforts, both for enforcement and indeed public education. President, over the next year, the country will be working with all stakeholders, including recycling partners of Jamaica Limited, on improving and upsizing the implementation of a deposit refund scheme for plastic bottles, including PET and HDPE bottles. Mr. President, we will be backing this with legislation. It will no longer be an example of good corporate social responsibility, but rather an act of compliance. Mr. President, the government will in short order address the issue of microplastics in personal care products. And indeed, the plastic lunchbox containers, which have replaced the banned styrofoam containers, will also be addressed. Early in the new year, I will make a detailed statement on the way forward with plastics. Citizens and businesses, however, can expect that this statement will be consistent with the articulated position of the UNEA 5.2 resolution related to plastics, which Jamaica proudly supported. Mr. President, pollution hasn't been limited solely to solid waste. It hasn't been limited to pollution of our landmass. We have had significant issues with marine pollution. Mr. President, Jamaica is also promulgating legislation to meet the country's obligations under the Marpol Convention, which seeks to address the pollution from ships, including oil, garbage, noxious substances, and indeed air emissions. It should also be noted that Jamaica is currently pursuing a project with the support of the International Atomic Energy Agency focused on the monitoring of the island's marine areas using nuclear science. Mr. President, Jamaica is also benefiting from the EU-funded project, a Jamaica Path from Hills to Oceans, which started in 2020 and is being coordinated by the PIOJ. Technical inputs from the Public Gardens Division of the Ministry of Agriculture, RADA, and indeed NEPA. There is also strong collaboration with the Ministry of Economic Growth, Forestry Department, the Met Services, and the WRA. In essence, we are mapping all of the dump points or the leak points into our waterways that go into the ocean to start to deal with it, as we said, from hills to oceans. Other areas, Mr. President, areas of focus for this project include Wagwater in St. Mary, including Castleton and Rio Nuevo in St. Anne. It also deals with Rio Bueno in Trelawney, and other focus areas include the wetland ecosystems in Falmouth, the Mason River Protected Area in St. Anne and Clarendon, and the seagrass beds of Ocho Rios, of the Ocho Rios Marine Protected Area in St. Anne. Under the project, the coastal management initiatives for Helsha Bay and Half Moon Bay within the Portland Bight Protected Area are also being focused on. Mr. President, the tough topic of legislation. The Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation will be amending the Wildlife Protection Act and the Natural Resources Conservation Authority Act in this financial year to facilitate increases in fines and penalties. Those who have flouted our laws and polluted with little to no consequence will now see consequences that match the scale of the problem. That will happen before the completion of the financial year. Mr. President, MEGJEC intends to solve a long-standing environmental issue with the amendments to come to the Wildlife Protection Act. Members of this House should be aware that Jamaica signed the SPA Protocol in 1990. The SPA Protocol follows an ecosystem approach and supplies a unique legal framework for the conservation of the region's biodiversity. Now, Jamaica has been unable to accede to the protocol and be fully compliant with its intent for 32 years because of the failure to amend the Wildlife Protection Act. Mr. President, this administration will address this legacy issue before the end of this fiscal year.
The informative information presented in this video is motivational and is positively aimed at inspiring, educating and entertaining the viewers with the cutting edge of critical reasoning. If you enjoy the contents on the Black Radar YouTube channel, please consider subscribing to show your support.
This is Muta Baruka. We want to present to you a wholesome kind of level of consciousness right now. So subscribe and tell your friend them. This is Muta Baruka.